Welcome, everybody. Bienvenue, Anine, to the and final panel discussion of the Adams Sustainability Celebration at the University of Toronto. And it's the next webinar in U of T's Community of Practice on Sustainability Teaching. My name is Hilary Inwood. I'm the coordinator of the Sustainability and Climate Action Network at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, commonly known as OISE. It's the Faculty of Ed for U of T. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the organizing team of the Community of Practice, of which I'm a member. We're all very pleased to be offering this webinar as part of the Adams Sustainability Celebration, which is organized by the Committee on the Environment, Climate Change and Sustainability, commonly known as the CECCS, which is led by co-chairs Dr. John Robinson and Ron Sapora and Director Chrissy Fasser. Please note that this event today is being recorded and it will be shared on the CECCS's website and YouTube channel. Please do keep your microphones turned off until the question period so we can ensure that we can hear our speakers clearly. Now, this is what you can expect in terms of our agenda for today's webinar. We're going to begin with a land acknowledgement. We're going to do an introduction to the CECCS and the Adams Sustainability Celebration, as well as a little bit on the community of practice on sustainability teaching. And then I'll introduce our speakers, Dr. Heather Burns and Dr. Rob Van Weinsberg. This will be followed by a question and answer at the end. So we're really thrilled to welcome you all here today, and we'll begin with a land acknowledgement. We've been experimenting with arts-based land acknowledgements, and so we'd like to introduce you to this mural in particular, which is located on the University of Toronto campus on the north facade of the Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape and Design. It's at 1 Spadina Crescent here in the heart of Toronto. It was created by multidisciplinary artist K-Rock, who's a member of Nipissing First Nation. K-Rock's visual art includes everything from large-scale street art projects and even small works on canvas. But all of his works draw from both Anishinaabe culture and daily urban interactions. This particular piece symbolizes the 7 grandfather teachings of humility, courage, honesty, wisdom, truth, respect, and love, all of which are needed in the teaching of sustainability, and features Grandfather Sun and Grandmother Moon, which represent the connection to Turtle Island, the Water Nation, and Mother Earth. At the center, which is shaded with the colors of the traditional medicine wheels, children are carried by eagles to the spirit world. The design honors the 215 children whose unmarked graves were discovered at the site of a former residential school in Kamloops, BC a few years ago, as well as the graves that continue to be uncovered across Turtle Island. So with this mural in mind, we acknowledge the traditional territory upon which we gather at the University of Toronto for this webinar today. This land has a long and tangled history that carries the storied footprints of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee nations who have sought to walk gently on this land. This territory is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, as well as by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee nations to peacefully share and care for the lands and resources around the Great Lakes. This acknowledgement signals our desire to create a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one based on honor and deep respect. And it's certainly a starting point to remind us all to enact the work of decolonization and reconciliation in our personal and professional lives. This is especially true since we have so much to learn from Indigenous peoples about how to conceptualize and enact climate justice and sustainability and how we live on Mother Earth. So as part of the work that we do in learning more about Indigenous ways of knowing at U of T, as well as in the work that we do in sustainability, I'd like to just give you just a tiny bit of information about the Adams Sustainability Celebration, which is a tribute to the growing community of sustainability-minded students, faculty, and staff at the University of Toronto who are working towards climate justice, sustainability, and climate action. The Adams Sustainability Celebration is hosted by the Committee on the Environment, Climate Change and Sustainability, commonly known as the CECCS, and made possible by a generous donation from Wendy Adams. The purpose of this event series is to celebrate successes, inspire new activities, build relationships, and collaboratively deepen campus engagement around climate justice and sustainability. If you have any questions about the Adams Sustainability Celebration or the CECCS, we can pop into the chat for you, the link to the CECCS's website, and I'll ask Christy Bard, who's one of our colleagues from that organization, to drop that into the chat for us. I'd also like to introduce you just a little bit to the community of practice on sustainability teaching, of which I'm a member. I'd like to also introduce you to my colleagues, Liat Margulis, Michael Claessens, Nicole Spiegelar, and Sarah Yerkart, who are part of the organizing committee for this group. We call it a COP, though we're not crazy about the acronym, but this COP brings together U of T faculty, staff, and doctoral students across all 3 campuses, and in conjunction with events like this, to people from around the world to discuss and critically analyze curriculum and pedagogy around sustainability teaching. The COP began about a year ago with funding from the School of the Environment and support from the CECCS and from OISE, and it's now been designated as a Jackman Humanities Institute Working Group for this academic year. We're thrilled to have such a strong attendance for today's event, and we encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from, maybe what traditional territories you're on, and know that this is our 8th event that we've offered over the last year. So we've been busy, and for me, this has been really an amazing point of joy to be able to connect with colleagues across all 3 of our campuses, people that I have never met before, but I have discovered share common aims to discuss the what and the how of teaching sustainability in inter and transdisciplinary ways. We also aim to define and analyze what sustainability pedagogy is about across our programs, across faculties, and across the 3 campuses that U of T has in downtown Toronto, in Mississauga, and in Scarborough. And looking at our course and program development, and as well as how sustainability teaching is manifested through co-curricular learning. We aim to critique and reimagine the ways in which sustainability is taught through transformative and intersectional approaches. And if you'd like more information on the COP events, Sarah Urquhart is going to be popping links for us into the chat today. She's one of our amazing doctoral students who helps us to organize the COP, and she'll pop the link to our Community of Practice webpage, where you can get more information and you can join our contact list if you'd like. Now, I appreciate that was all a long introduction. So at this point, I'm really pleased to introduce you to our 2 speakers for today's event. Dr. Heather Burns is an associate professor and director of the Leadership for Sustainability Education graduate program in the Educational Leadership and Policy Department at Portland University. This is a reminder, just please to mute your microphone so we don't have bleed through into our speakers' talks today. Thank you. Heather lives and works in Portland, Oregon, in the Willamette River Valley on the unceded and historic homelands of the Multnomah, Clackamas, Waltla, and Kalapua people. I hope I pronounced those right. Heather, if not, you're going to pronounce them correctly for us when you start. She teaches graduate courses on sustainability leadership, sustainability pedagogy, ecological and whole systems design, spiritual leadership, and deep ecology. She enjoys teaching classes at the Learning Gardens Laboratory, which is a dynamic garden-based and climate education site where she served faculty coordinator for over a decade. Her scholarship focuses on sustainability pedagogy, including the roles of transformative learning, contemplative inquiry, experiential learning, and community-based learning in creating sustainable change. Dr. Burns has published in a wide variety of academic articles and book chapters, which is how I came across her work as I was planning my own course in transformative approaches last year. And she's a contributor to the recently published book, The Palgrave Handbook on Learning for Transformation. She's currently working on a new book about designing and facilitating transformative eco-spiritual learning. And she's also, as a side note, a certified forest therapy guide, a certified cultural designer, and an polycultural gardener. And I'm hoping we're going to hear more about all 3 of these things in your talk today, Heather. Just before you begin, I am going to have just to do the introduction for our second speaker as well. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Robert Van Weinsberg last 7 years. We work on a national network dedicated to environmental and sustainability ed in teacher education. Rob's an associate professor in the Department of Educational Studies at UBC. He coordinates a teacher education cohort in education for sustainability, and he's the academic lead on a master in education program in education for sustainability, regeneration, and resilience. He initiates and develops programs as part of his current research interests. His own educational philosophy, coined adaptive education, is based on a neo-pragmatist theory of human action, which focuses on and creative solutions to challenge everyday life. Robert's currently exploring the concept of transformative learning to categorize the various strategies that are brought together to make learning relevant to students' goals, explore their experiences, classrooms into learner-led spaces that express democratic values. Inspired by the work of Mesereau, he's particularly intrigued by the capacity for transformative learning to capture cumulative learning as it unfolds according to adult education's notions of lifelong and life-wide education. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing screen, and I'm going to invite Heather Burns to be our keynote speaker for today. Thank you, Heather. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, get this set up here. One second. Okay, we're there. Great. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Hillary, for that lovely introduction. I'm so pleased and honored and happy to be with you today to explore this field that I'm passionate about, transformative sustainability pedagogy. So this is just a little overview of what I'd like to share with you in the next 30 minutes or so of my time here. I'd like us to begin with an opening circle, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by transformative sustainability education and what it means to bring a transformative approach to sustainability learning courses. I want to share with you my model, the Burns model of sustainability pedagogy, and then offer some time for some reflective writing and to do some observations that may inform some transformative design. So I'd like to invite us to begin with an opening circle. And this is a teaching tool that I have developed and used for years and has had a very transformative impact on my students, some of whom are in this room with us today, some former students, and shout out to them. It has a strong impact because of its potential to bring us together in a number of ways. Opening circle typically has 3 parts: a check-in, some breathing and mindfulness, and some movement. It's a way that I start all my classes and events because it's a way to acknowledge that we are whole beings in a relational learning space together. So to me, this opening practice really embodies relational transformative sustainability learning. So we can begin with this practice, and then we'll move into some more theory and playing around with what this means. So I just want to invite you to take a deep breath. Just acknowledge that this is a transition point from whatever else you've been doing the rest of your day up to this point. And just to check in and notice, how is your heart today? This is another way of asking you, how are you doing or how are you feeling? How is your heart today? And just take a moment to ask this of yourself and notice if there's a response. And then I want to invite you, if you'd like to just share briefly, maybe a word or a few words in the chat in response to this question. How is your heart today? Thank you. Lots of great responses. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you for everyone who shared. My heart is feeling pretty grounded today, a little bit buzzy because I'm presenting, but pretty open and curious and grounded. I really appreciate everyone who has shared in the chat. Lots of different responses there all over the place. And this is, thanks for being real. Thanks for being, bringing your real selves here. So now that we've done some checking in with ourselves and with each other, even in this large format, even though we're not in a physical circle, we're in a circle together. And I want to invite us to do just a little bit of breathing and movement. So I invite you to just take a moment to sit up in a comfortable upright position wherever you are, getting your spine straight, getting your feet flat on the floor. And I invite you to close or soften your eyes. And just to start with 3 deep breaths. And whenever you're coming to the natural end of those 3 deep breaths, just move into a natural breathing rhythm. Just noticing the breath coming into your body and coming out of your body. And checking in with your body and noticing how your body is feeling today, right now. Noticing if there are spaces of tension, places that you can breathe into and maybe soften, bring some softness with your breath. Just noticing how it feels to attend to our bodies and our breath in this space together. And to remember that we're part of a larger breathing earth body right now, right here. And take a few more deep breaths. And then as you're ready, opening your eyes again, coming back to the circle. And we're going to do just a little bit of body movement, just to remember our bodies. Remember that we're here learning together in our bodies. So I invite you to do a little bit of movement. We're going to do some circles of our neck, round, moving our necks around, only doing whatever body movement feels right for you in your body right now, changing directions, moving the neck in a circle gently, breathing and coming back to center. Let's do some shoulder rolls, rolling our shoulders back, giving our shoulder blades a nice massage. Keep breathing. And then rolling our shoulders forward. And then coming back to center. And then doing a little twist in our chairs or wherever you are, just a little bit of twist. Oh, give my back a nice twist. Looking over your shoulder as you twist. And then coming back to center. And now just do one more movement that your body wants to do. Whatever you need to do to kind of stretch or move your body a little bit. Just feel what your body needs. And then we're going to end with just a little shakeout, shaking your hands, shaking your arms, shaking your head. If you're in a place where you can stand up and shake your whole body and shake your legs, that feels really good. Just shaking your body a little bit, waking up, enlivening the body. Okay, Thank you for participating in Opening Circle. It takes a little bit of time, but I found it to be such an important part of holistic and relational learning and in acknowledging that we are whole people, especially with a group over time. It's very, it can be very transformative. Okay, so let's jump into transformative sustainability education. I see this field as an edge between the fields of transformative learning and sustainability education. And just like ecological edges, where two or more biosystems meet, edges tend to be very diverse and interesting places. I see transformative sustainability education as really designing learning, or in many cases, designing unlearning that has the potential to provoke deep personal and cultural shifts in our values, in our ways of being. And many times on this journey, it's about unlearning our dominant paradigms and our dominant systems, unlearning systems like heteropatriarchy and white supremacy culture and neoliberalism, and some of our key values like violence and separation and urgency. So really working to unlearn those systems. And I see it also as a shift away from a dominant paradigm of education that's really rooted in, still in what Paulo Freire would call the banking model of education, where learners are primarily vessels and instructors offer deposits of information. Our dominant paradigm of education tends to be passive, separated from our real whole selves, separated from real issues, and almost always separated from the earth. So at the heart, transformative sustainability education really focuses on relationships, relational learning, and reconnection. So to me, what does it mean to bring a transformative approach to sustainability courses, or any courses for that matter? It means bringing in pedagogies that are related, emotional, spiritual, embodied, all of these things that cultivate whole person learning. And at the same time, cultivate our intra-relationship, our interbeing with the more than human world, with the living world. So cultivating both in terms of relationships. This is not an easy thing to do within our institutional structures and our dominant systems that don't value this kind of learning. But this is something I'm really interested in, and I've been grappling with pretty much my whole career, is that this is such powerful learning, and how do we do it, and how do we do it well? So I want to share with you this model that I created and that I use and that I teach with my students as a practical way to design and facilitate holistic relational learning that has the potential to be transformative. At the center of this model is an ecological design process that weaves together these 4 dimensions to create transformative sustainability pedagogy. So we're going to come back to ecological design in a moment, but I'd like to briefly walk you through these 4 petals or dimensions and share a little bit more about reconnecting content, radical perspectives, real place context, and a relational process. And as we walk through, I want to also just say that I'll be connecting each dimension to an aspect of learners' whole selves. And this is based on an article that I wrote, which applies Okanagan Indigenous ways of knowing, especially about the whole self and how they connect. So the first dimension is reconnecting content. This is really about reconnecting what we're learning to ourselves, to each other, to the world, to the earth. Reconnecting learning means inviting plurality and multiple ways of knowing. This is about inviting interdisciplinarity and making sure the learning is it's co-constructed. It's about discourse. It's relational and dynamic. It's not a static. It's not a static thing. Content. So some of the best ways that I found to do this are through themes or thematic learning. And some of the themes that I've used in courses include sustainable food systems, rest, decolonization, restoring, resilience during climate change, and more, as a way to weave together, to bring together lots of different aspects of a topic. The next dimension is radical perspectives. This is in sustainability learning. We really want to challenge power. We want to challenge systems of oppression and center radical, diverse, and non-dominant perspectives. Again, this is a lot about unlearning our dominant systems. And as we do this, we may be engaging learners' emotional selves. As unlearning and learning about power systems can often be very emotional. And inviting students' emotional selves is a non-dominant perspective in itself. So we may do this by listening to, reflecting on, reading about, discussing, experiencing non-dominant perspectives. And this photo is a photo of several of my students learning about deep ecology and sustainable food systems on a trip to rural Nicaragua, where we learned a lot about non-dominant perspectives. Real place context. Sustainability learning really can and should foster reciprocal relationships with the living earth. I want to credit Robin Wall Kimmerer's work here around reciprocity and how we can learn to love the earth, give to the earth, and also receive in return, a reciprocal relationship with the earth. Learning can connect to real communities and engage learners' spiritual selves. Many indigenous traditions, including the Okanagan tradition, sees the spiritual self as inherently connected to the earth, to the land, the places where we live and breathe and work and eat. And so we can do this kind of learning by engaging in learning outside, engaging with other living beings, through sit spots, mindful walks, forest bathing, through gardening and farming, through community-based learning. And all of this doesn't necessarily happen inside of class. It can be through assignments or opportunities outside of class time as well, but really important to engage in and acknowledge that our learning happens in a real place. And finally, a relational process. So sustainability learning is inclusive, collaborative, and process-oriented. We want to engage our learners' physical selves, our bodies, our energetic selves, our relational selves. We're really learning as much from each other in relationship as we are from anything else. We can do this through circles, discussions, body movement, relationship building, play, all kinds of ways to engage a relational active learning process. And so just coming back here to the model to see it again and look at the dimensions. And at the center of the model is an ecological design process, which has the potential, again, to foster transformative learning. And this whole model really centers inclusion, justice, and holistic learning. So I want to share with you just a bit more about ecological design. As educators, we are designers. And we typically design learning in ways that reflect our dominant culture. We do this often without even realizing it or wanting to do this, but this is how we've been trained to do it. But if we can design learning in ways that connect more closely to ecological patterns and relationships and processes, we can make the learning more relational, more ecological, we could say. So ecological design is adapted from permaculture design, but it is basically the careful design of relationships to create nurturing systems that care for the earth, care for humans, and focus on equity and abundance. And I'm really interested in learning how to design experiences that create caring and nurturing systems. So this is a way that ecological design can be enacted or done. It is a nonlinear process that typically begins with observation. Really in designing something, designing a learning scenario, a sustainability learning scenario, we might say, we start with observation, looking deeply at what is already happening, what relationships exist, and then move into visioning, looking at what feelings, values, and relationships we might want to bring to life. And from there, moving into what's typically called planning, it's more shaping and patterning what activities or elements we might include and why, when, and how it happens. So the main difference with ecological design is that there's an extended time around visioning and observing, especially observing. When we jump into planning, as we most typically do, we're going to plan anything or design anything. We don't leave room for the context and what is happening already in this scenario. So two things I've noticed is that we can spend time deeply observing and visioning in the design process. We can avoid design flaws. And when we get to the shaping and patterning parts, the actual what's going to happen part, the design really emerges quite naturally without having to force anything. And once the design is patterned, we engage in the learning scenario and observe what is happening, what is the feedback. It's a very iterative design process. So I just want to say just a little bit about observation. It's really important from the lens of quantum physics. We know that what we observe and how we observe is what we will bring into being. Slowing down to really observe a context, a situation, or place means that we're also making space to participate in the creation of what we observe. When we look at something, we help determine its final state. Another way of saying it, in the words of writer Octavia Butler, is that when we design ecologically, we shape change. So what I'd like to do is invite you now to do some reflective writing. So grab something to write with, or open a doc where you can reflect, or if writing is not your best thing, you might want to doodle or just sit and reflect, but just take a moment to prepare. And I'd like you to think about a learning scenario that you might want to design or redesign. What's a learning scenario that you're involved in or that you may want to create? Let's get that in your mind. It might be a course, a project, a workshop, some other learning experience. And I'd like to offer some prompts for observation that connect to the dimensions of the Burns model and help us to more deeply just observe the context in the scenario and really observe and think about that before jumping into any kind of planning. So if you're writing for this reflective writing time, just let the writing be free without belaboring anything. Just see what emerges. I'm going to do some free writing here. So here we go. In your learning scenario that you want to design, what is the place where the design is happening? Who are the participants? What do we know about their needs? And next, what learning theme plays a key role in this experience? What learning theme plays a key role in this experience? What non-dominant perspectives impact this learning experience? What might need to be unlearned? How does the learning experience invite connection with the land and local communities? How does the learning experience invite connection with the land and local communities? What relationships exist and what relationships can be enhanced? This might be organizational relationships, it might be personal relationships, all kinds of relationships could live here. What kind of relationships exist and what relationships can be enhanced? And finally, how does the learning experience nurture learners' whole selves? How does it nurture learners' interconnectedness? How does the learning experience nurture learners' whole selves? How does it nurture learners' interconnectedness? So if you're writing, this is a good time to wrap up whatever you're writing. So this is just a little taste of what the observation process of ecological design could look like. I invite you to continue observing deeply, and extended observation is best. And from there, it moves quite naturally. You may have already started doing it into envisioning what it could look like or what it might look like and what you want it to look like. And from those steps, the shape of the ecological design can emerge quite beautifully. So just as I wrap up my time here, I invite you to take a moment to breathe again and just reflect. What are you noticing? And what are your questions you may want to jot down as we come back? We'll come back to questions in a bit here. Just take a moment to do that. I want to close with a very short poem, as I often do in my classes. I love to bring in poetry and art as a way of enhancing and just inviting holistic learning. So this poem is called Winter Poem by Nikki Giovanni. Once a snowflake fell on my brow, and I loved it so much, and I kissed it, and I was happy, and called its cousins and brothers, and a web of snow engulfed me. Then I reached to love them all, and I squeezed them, and they became a spring rain, and I stood perfectly still and was a flower.
What a lovely note to leave us on, Heather. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And I appreciate your invitation to have people think and reflect on what they've just heard and experienced, as well as to think. So just hold tight on the questions for now. Blake's already popped one into the chat. And I think it's a great question, like about questions. And we'll return to this after we've heard Rob's talk as well. Thank you so much, Heather. Mm-hmm. If you've just joined us, we did introductions to both speakers at the beginning. So at this point, I'm just going to quickly turn over to Dr. Rob Van Wansberg.
Hi, it's just going to take me a second to get my slides up. So if I could ask just for a bit of patience, just. Okay, so I just wanted to check, have you got the full slides in front of you? Okay, and can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Oh, thank you very much, Heather. I wanted to say that I took down everything on the observation exercise, and it was really beneficial, actually, was to think through things. So thank you very much. And I'll try in a couple of ways, perhaps, to build on some of the things that you said, but in some ways, it's a nice little mirror image of one another, because I'm in a slightly different space in having started a master's program something like 5 years ago, and still experimenting and trying to think about ways that the program itself can lead change at the University of British Columbia, where I'm from. So, there might be some similarities and some useful differences. So let me get started by thanking you for allowing me to talk and to say that I had a really nice introduction. Hillary introduced me really well. So I'm not going to go over that again. I will add two things, and I think they're important. One is that I'm a sociologist by training. And for me, education became a kind of a vehicle for me to do the work that I felt needed to be done in sustainability. And it's been a journey. And now I'm in the Department of Educational Studies in a program in adult learning and education, which overlaps with sociology in many ways. But maybe like many of the people here today, you're thinking through how to do sustainability. You're looking at an institution that isn't always accommodating to the area. And we're trying to think about how it is that we can make a difference. And I think that's the journey that I was on, and I'm happy to talk about it. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about this master's program. There's been 2 cohorts that have gone through the program of 15 to 20 students. It's a 2-year professional program, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the details as I move through it. But let me say a couple of things. As a non-education person, I often try things out and then try to understand what it is that education has to say about that. And an interesting process. It works for me. A long time ago, I was trying to come up with pedagogies, and I was coming up with curriculum. And I happened to have as a partner a science educator who said, "You're not ready. You don't understand these terms well enough. Just talk about features. Just talk about your classrooms." And I think that's Heather's themes in some ways. And in doing that, I began to think about what it is that I really thought was important and needed to be figured out first. And that is, for me, a theory of human action. And so Hilary brought up neopragmatism. And for me, it is a theory of human action that allows me to think through what a classroom looks like if that classroom is designed for social change. So neopragmatism opened my eyes to the importance of habits, the importance of disruption, and the importance of creativity if we're going to talk about how to make change. And so that background became a kind of a focus for how it is that I organize this particular program. There's a host of teaching strategies, a number of pedagogies that work. The concept of transformative learning, or transformational learning, as I like to call it, is almost a container for those varieties of pedagogies that I use. So I hope you understand it that way as I move through this talk, and I'm happy to explore it in the Q&A afterwards. If there are burning questions, if there needs to be clarification, please use the chat. I realize there's a large number of people, but I know it's important for there to be clarity if we're going to build on ideas, and so I welcome it. I'm going to talk a lot about what I do in the classroom, a lot about examples. It's kind of a shotgun approach in some ways, but I'm trying to create a framework for doing that by talking about key sustainability competencies. It isn't necessarily an area that is without contention, but it does provide a framework and a way for me to talk about some of what I'm doing in the classroom. So I'm going to use it in that way. I'm also going to use it as a way to talk about what I think we need to do more moving forward. And this is where I think Heather's work nicely touches on this, in that some of what she talked about doing really meets some of the requirements of what I think we need to do to develop leaders in sustainability. So I'll touch on that in a little bit. And I'll just start with some key definitions. And I think the best way to start is just to let you take a look at this for a second. And I'll try to add elements to it. I'm not going to repeat what's in front of you. So I'll just leave you to take a look at this for a second. So I see sustainability as a social movement. I believe it's universal. I believe there are differences geographically and culturally, but I believe we have a shared grievance. I believe that we need a new story of modernity and progress, and that across the different social movement organizations that comprise the overall movement, that is the idea that brings many of us together, is that shared desire for a counter narrative or a new story. I believe that education for sustainability is higher education's response as an institution to the need for us to make a contribution to that movement. I think, as many of you probably already know, higher ed has difficulty making change. It's relatively conservative. The social institution to which it belongs tends to be one that reinforces the existing values. But I do think that some of what we're seeing at different universities all over the world is an attempt to make a contribution. And I think we have to support that. I think the particular kinds of things that can be done in our classrooms, even with the existing structure, brings together individual and collective learning. And I think that is the crux of transformational learning for me. It is this idea that as individuals and as groups working together, we can teach and learn from one another in trying to take action. And I think that's the beauty of transformational learning. That's what I like about it as a container for some of the pedagogies that I employ and other people employ. And transformational learning for me is an attempt to try to think through how people act, how people learn, and how we can design classrooms that facilitate that. I think, as I've mentioned earlier, that a key for me is to be mindful of the habits that we have in mind, that we employ in daily life, and the extent to which those habits create unsustainability. We then have to think through how it is we might make change by disrupting those habits, even in small ways. So everyday things multiplied by 7-8 billion people could create a problem. What is it that we can do that's simple, that changes the direction of that? One of the things I do in my classroom is ask people to come to class using a different mode of transportation. It's unbelievable how difficult it is for people to jump on a bike when they usually take a bus. And I ask them to chronicle it. And that is an attempt to just come to terms with what it means to disrupt and what it means to change. And we try to think through what it might mean at a larger scale to do something like that. I also ask them to think about the classroom as it might be changed, as it might be a disruption, as it might facilitate learning in different ways where it's designed differently. So I'll bring this up fairly quickly now. Competencies are a combination of abilities, skills, attitudes, and dispositions that help us to solve problems. In the area of sustainability, there's key sustainability competencies that are disputed left, right, and center. But I think what we're attempting to do here is to come up with some learning outcomes that can create the kinds of leaders that we feel we need moving forward. What I will say in this talk is that that's not enough, that I believe there's things that underlie competencies that are absolutely crucial, perhaps more crucial. And some people call these capabilities, some people call these capacities. These are the things that we as a species have within us, but we may not have exercised them in a very, very long time. And one of the reasons I believe that bringing in Indigenous thinking is important to sustainability classrooms is because that kind of writing, that kind of messaging actually speaks to these latent abilities that we have. And so it's absolutely crucial to think through what it is that we're capable of, because it has been documented in the past and by many societies. It is only perhaps the current kind of post-industrial society that's forgotten these. So that's one of the arguments that I think is important. So quickly, this is a schematic that just outlines the kinds of elements of key sustainability capacities or competencies. And I'd like to actually ground this in some of the work that I do with students in the master's program. So we actually work with the city of Vancouver, and we work with policymakers, and we approach them and ask them for the kinds of things that we think might be useful for us to do as student groups over the course of a 2-year program. We start very early in the program. And the idea is that we feel like in implementing some of what the city of Vancouver is trying to do, that we can be involved in disruption. We can be involved in studying how unsustainability has kind of built up over time. This necessitates creating really effective groups. We spend a great deal of time trying to figure out individual skills and abilities, topics of interest. And it's not easy. One of the reasons people come to graduate school is because they have a kind of a lingering research question, something that they would like to answer. So you can imagine in asking people to work in groups over time, to collaborate with city and community groups may not hit them as something that they're very interested in. What we do simultaneously with group work then is develop personal projects. And here again, you see that combination of group, collective, and individual learning. So it happens throughout the program that people can continue to do the kind of work that they want to do as individuals. And as one example, and something I was going to introduce given more time, is something like an individual student picking up an instrument and beginning to play music. So their personal project is music. That emerges because of the work that they're doing in group work. So we try to entertain both. We try to operate so that people can pursue both interests simultaneously. And I'll start with an example of the group work. So in this slide, on the right-hand side, you see something called Your City Hall. So the city of Vancouver has a democratic engagement focus. And one of the city staffers comes to our class suggesting that there's something that they would like to see done. In this specific example, they wanted us to go to an area in South Vancouver where many stories had not been collected of the residents. It was a relatively marginalized area of the city of Vancouver. And this particular person said, would you mind putting a group together and doing some work? So we go through the process of getting students interested in what are the essentials of this, which is inequity, which is voice. And these individuals who come from different backgrounds and have different specific interests agree to work together. And so on the left-hand side, you can see what they were able to do in that quote that comes from one of the students, Lissa. And in working with what's called a neighborhood house, which is kind of an intermediary group operating in the city of Vancouver, a neighborhood-based organization that has ties to the city that develops program locally. They were able to develop a storytelling program for senior Punjabi women who told stories which were then translated into a mural. And I'll show you this mural in the next slide. But the idea here is that this was not an individual project for any of the students. They had interests in equity, they had interests in voice, but they didn't necessarily have this specific interest. And so what we're trying to do as a program is to say, you are in service as part of your learning, and here is what we've identified as an issue. And they, despite COVID in this case, came forward and did some very interesting work that I'll just give you a little taste of next. So this is an artistic rendering, but this is the mural being created. It came from the stories. It is the story of women who immigrated to Canada, some of the struggles they've experienced, some of the memories that they have of home. This was an old wading pool in a park in South Vancouver, and it's fairly sizable. And the project took quite a while. We had to acquire a fair amount of funding, and the students wrote the grants to get the funding. And then they put this mural together. It's obviously still there. Sorry about that. Okay, so that was one example. So what I'm going to do next is just talk a little bit about these competencies, some of these skills and abilities, but more of a focus is the kinds of things that we try to do throughout the program in order to build out these kinds of things. So systems thinking competency is one that is identified as being important. I've defined it on the left-hand side, and I'll let you take a look at this. And then I'm going to try to introduce two fundamental aspects of the program. One I call inter or transdisciplinary, and that is the deliberate effort to combine diverse disciplinary backgrounds in the composition of the students that attend the program. So I am in the education faculty. We are obviously very important in teachers, teacher training, teacher professional development. But I don't think that sustainability can be achieved unless we approach things from a transdisciplinary perspective. So part of the program's dedicated to people with an educational background. The other part of the class is dedicated to people who are not from an educational background, but have an interest. And so in the past, we've had lawyers, filmmakers, ceramicists, activists, artists. And the idea is that in coming together from these different backgrounds, there's a kind of peer-to-peer learning that can go on. But the broader learning outcome is that we need to be diverse. We need to understand a variety of things, and we can learn from one another in this way. The research techniques that we employ in doing our group work are diverse. We try to emphasize things like participatory action research, and we have a specific framework that we employ. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But really, we're trying to bring that diversity to the table, which then brings up the group piece one more time, and the importance of what we call a cohort. And people don't spend a lot of time talking about how important cohorts are, but they are not analogous to a community. They are a very different entity. They are people that become so focused on their involvement in the program that they want to see each other succeed as much as they want each other, as they want to succeed as individuals. One of the ways we do this is at the camping on the river. And the idea is to understand the Fraser River in this case as it crosses many, many jurisdictions, levels of government, as it is understood as a major form of transportation, as a major natural resource, and as a place to play. And it's actually a really powerful part of the program. And even 2 years into the program, you still hear people alluding to the 2 days or 3 days we spent on the Fraser River. Just as a bit of an aside, but it's the surprises that are also important here. The one time we entered the Fraser River from the Coquitlam First Nation, we saw a sturgeon surface. And it's just not something I've seen in all my years in Vancouver. And one other surprising episode was our being approached by nude sunbathers who wanted to know if they could come canoeing with us. So these kinds of things are educational in their own way, and they're very interesting. But the idea is that we're trying to think through what it is to engage in systems thinking by the way that we run the program, by the people that participate in the program. Another aspect is a values thinking competency. And we do a lot of work on trying to think through what matters and how what matters at its core can be a way of bringing together diverse groups. That happens in terms of the people in the city of Vancouver that we work with, city officials, but also it happens within the class and it happens within the groups. One of the big pieces, and I think I talked about this a little bit, is that we emphasize what we call service learning and the fact that we're in service. Now, that brings up important questions. Some people in the class initially ask why it is that they're volunteering with a major entity like the city of Vancouver. And the answer is that this is a powerful way to learn. And so we engage in that. Heather brought up Robin Kimmerer. And another part of what's important in terms of values is to think about all that we read for class, all that we do in preparation, and how language itself in what we read in preparing for class carries with it values. And we think through what it is to do things perhaps differently in the classroom, so it isn't as reliant on some of the more formal academic writing. So that's really important as well. Futures thinking is another competency that's in the literature extensively. I think in the interest of time, maybe I'll move through this a little bit because I can hit this in another way in a second. strategic thinking is important, and it's kind of a competency that's throughout the literature itself. And one of the things that we do is we engage in what's called tactical urbanism, which is a form of the disruptions that we talked about in the past that comes from architecture. And so we engage in small processes of disrupting the normal in order to learn what's going on, in order to understand how attached people are and to gather information. Tactical urbanism has a relationship to arts-based environmental education and direct action. So it works really well for the program. And just to give you a couple of examples, we wear prototypes. So if we have a prototypical solution that we want to test out, I ask students to wear those prototypes. So in the past, we've dressed up like brown bananas and gone out onto a sidewalk and asked people questions about what food rots in their fridge first. And the answer is actually cilantro, if you're wondering. But the larger point is to engage in a conversation about food waste. We've also had students wear wetsuits at a city meeting that dealt with sea level rise. And the wetsuit is designed to show kind of where we're headed with sea level rise and then how high it would be on that wetsuit. And so you engage people in conversations. And I think it's important that students do this because you wouldn't be able to see a city official do it. So the city official gets information that they wouldn't be able to get in this fashion. So it's also important to do things this way. And it has this connection back to the literature in terms of arts-based environmental ed or tactical urbanism, direct action. So I've talked a little bit about the fact that we partner with the City of Vancouver and that we have conversations in class, we use dialogue. So one of the inspirations for our work is a semester in dialogue at Simon Fraser University. We spend a lot of time working on research questions. And one of the things that we've started to do is to compare and contrast classics within the area of sustainability with what might be considered the more contemporary version of that classic. So Schumacher's Economics as If People Mattered gets compared and contrasted to Kate Raworth's Donut Economics. And the intention there is to help sort of fill in people's understanding of the area of sustainability. So you may have people who haven't thought about sustainability from an economics perspective. But the other thing is to make sure that we're kind of in a place where we feel comfortable about the breadth of the area of sustainability. And so that's an important piece for us. And it comes up because in some cases, the discipline of sustainability is important and people want to see it as a discipline because it helps them move forward in terms of their own aspirations. So it's important to have that breadth and to bring it to the table, I think. I'll just move. So this is just a repeat of a slide that I showed earlier, but just to bring it back together in terms of the integration of these key areas, these key sustainability competencies. And here's a point that I'd like to leave us with. So we've talked a little bit about key sustainability competencies. There's lots of conversation about what it is that could lie underneath. And I talked about the latent capabilities that we don't necessarily pursue in class well enough. I think that was one of the nice pieces about Heather's presentation. So this comes from Harold Glaser. These are some of what might be called the capabilities or the capacities that we appear to have that we do not exercise. They're not part of our classrooms. We don't bring them to the table. Affinity for all life, state of the planet knowledge, wise decision-making, modeling sustainable behavior, and transformative social change. So I would say that these are the kinds of things that are hard to bring into programs, but have to be brought into programs. And I mentioned this earlier, I feel like one of the ways that we can do this is a land-based and indigenous education that the authors, the Kimmerers of the world, allow us to engage at least at some level in these conversations. And I think that's absolutely critical. I think I've got 2 minutes left, and I'll try to talk about how I'm going to do this, planning to do this next. So I've run the program twice. I've run it in partnership with the City of Vancouver. This next iteration, I'm attempting to run it with 2 additional faculties. In order to get to this place, the 2 faculties are land and food systems and forestry. And my feeling is fish farm and forest gives us the kind of grounding that enables us to work in these areas. It's been the 2 deans that I've talked with have agreed to do this. So I'm now beginning to develop a master's program that it is interfaculty and still delivers the master's in education. But I'm excited about it because I think that this is the kinds of things that we need to move to next. And I think that's probably critical to transformational learning. So maybe what I'll do is I'll leave that there, Hillary, and just say thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this.
Thank you so much, Rob. I love hearing about the competencies. It's something that I've engaged with myself in some thinking about and talking with colleagues. And it's tricky because there are many different versions of the competencies, but we were really pleased to learn about the ones that you're thinking about and working within your own model. What I loved about both yours and Heather's presentations that they were so completely different. And I think that speaks to the power of transformative learning to be manifested in lots of different ways. I do know that it's very different from the rhetoric we're often hearing in our universities, especially at U of T, as universities as sites for transformation towards sustainability. And certainly we can be that, but we can't be that if we're going to simply replicate the same pedagogy that we've been using in the past that got us into the climate crisis in the first place. So we've had a question just very briefly about what we don't typically share slides, Rosie, just so you know, but we will be sharing a link to the recording of today's session. So you're welcome to go back and review, because I agree there's lots of great material from both Heather and Rob. I do encourage you to pop your questions into the chat or to put your hand up. We did have a couple of questions that were submitted in advance, so I'll start there, and then maybe we can move into some of the questions from the chat or people with hands up as well. So one of the questions was, how do we appropriately value pragmatism and rationalism and banish faith narratives from secular institutions that teach sustainability pedagogy? So I'll let either you or Heather, Rob, address that question.
I'll just take a breath, Heather. So you could go first.
That's a big question. Yeah. Can you read it one more time?
Absolutely. And maybe I'll switch it a little bit for my own purposes. The question that was phrased was, how do we appropriately value pragmatism and rationalism and banish faith narratives from secular institutions that teach sustainability pedagogy? I'm going to ask not how do we do this, but should we do this? Maybe that's a better way to frame it. And I'll pop it in the chat, Heather, if that helps at all. And I'm sorry, I don't have the name of the person who submitted it previously.
So I'm guessing this question maybe is around things like climate change, and how do we, in some ways, I think we need to not value rationalism as much as we do. On the other hand, there is a dominant narrative around dismissing science and it's usually based in faith narratives. So I think personally, personal experience, inviting students, learners into personal experiences that challenge their beliefs in all kinds of ways, and that give them a holistic breadth of ways to explore issues so that they're opened and introduced to a variety of narratives is so important. Yeah, that I've just really witnessed how that can really change people's minds, open people to new ways of thinking and being.
Well, I would just say, I don't think that we should be about dismissing some and picking up others. I think what we're trying to do, and you can turn to the competencies literature, the capabilities, is to hold multiple ways of knowing up. And I think that's the key thing. And it really is driven by what I would call intellectual curiosity, right? You don't always have to agree, but it is important, I think, to listen. And also I brought up indigeneity a number of times. I think that a cosmological perspective that runs counter to the rational one is actually one that we want to entertain and indulge and think through, because we're definitely lacking a kind of story that people feel like represents what they value. So I think we should be entertaining all kinds of different perspectives, and some of these will be religious and some of these will be economic, but I think it's probably part of learning, and I think that's the important part.
Thank you very much. Jason's asked in the chat, can you discuss what are some of the challenges and what are some of the opportunities for training faculty to utilize transformative learning pedagogies in their courses?
I could maybe jump in here. If I can turn to the teacher education program for a second, I also am the kind of academic lead on a sustainability focused elementary cohort of 36 students. Boy, oh boy, it's hard to do something differently, because in our case, all 720 students have to go through the same experience for some reason, and trying to do anything differently seems to be difficult to manage. And I think it's important. I mean, if we're going to develop teacher educators with a sustainability focus, they do need to go on field trips. And then you ask teacher education office for extra money for field trips. And it's like, well, we don't have field trips because we have 8 courses per semester because we're developing teachers in 11 months. And I think that to me is a really big challenge, is approaching things pedagogically differently. And so that's what I would mention.
And Heather, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think some of the issues around increased workload for faculty and increased class sizes, the urgency and speed at which education happens nowadays is a significant challenge. And I think an opportunity that exists in this kind of transformative learning pedagogies is that as teachers or facilitators, we don't have to hold it all either. When we invite all the learners to participate and to engage in different ways and to engage with community partners, we can't control and hold everything that happens. We want to invite that plurality of knowing and that interchange, which in some way frees us up as teacher instructors to kind of allow the process to happen in the container of good design.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've got to admit, as someone who attempted last spring for the first time to teach my entire graduate course outside, a quest for transformative place-based learning, I discovered quickly that our campus is not set up for that at all. And many places even around the city, something as simple as a location of, is there a washroom nearby that we can utilize for our class time? So there's no doubt that there are significant challenges, but boy, does it offer wonderful opportunities. I know that the reactions, and maybe Heather and Rob can speak to this, the reactions I've had from students when I use a model that's closer to transformative learning is so incredibly positive.
Yeah, I just will bring up one example. We're trying to use the UBC farm more extensively for those purposes. And it's exactly what you identified, Hillary, like the internet doesn't work out there. There's no washrooms, but it's magic. And, it's just this jewel in the midst of this growing city. So yeah, it's the opportunity, but there's the challenge, and they're both in the same space, but it's also a learning opportunity. We're thinking through how it is we can design a course around creating a teaching garden at the farm. So then that becomes a kind of interesting way to do, the kind of work that we want to do. So, yeah.
And Heather, garden-based pedagogy is one of the pieces that you use.
Right. Yeah.
As well.
Mhm. Yeah,
Can you
we
speak
do
a little bit
a
about the
program.
reactions of your students to that?
We're very fortunate to have a large learning gardens lab space, so an outdoor space where we do a lot of both garden-based learning and just other learning. We just can be outside there, and that relationship with land, with a piece of land, with the seasons, with the processes, with the earth has been really, powerful and transformative. Where students really get to connect with the communities that live there. Around that area, and also just the land itself, and learn how to grow food. It's a powerful thing. Yeah, I think
One of the
we're moving to this. We want to move towards this paradigm of relationality, right, and connection, and that includes connection with the earth and deeper connection with each other. And so those outdoor experiential based experiences are so important in learning those values and that different paradigm.
Now, one of the questions that's in the chat right now, and it's a great question, is aligns with actually a question it was submitted earlier about whether these proposed learning experiences or disruptions, are they only for higher ed? And if not, is there ways that we can bring them from higher ed into K-12 education as well?
I could try to answer that. One of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is to bring different disciplines into teacher education. So I have an Aboriginal community planner come in, and I have a green architect come in, and they actually take their exercises from, say, their university classes, and they use them with pre-service teachers so that the teachers can use them in their classrooms. And they're extremely simple. So the architect does tactical urbanism by asking students to go outside with a piece of chalk and a pylon and write down, this is a bike lane. And then to observe people's behavior when all you see is a piece of chalk saying this is a bike lane. All of a sudden the cars get way over on the left-hand side and the bikers start to use it. And so very simple exercise used by the architect in the teacher education classroom becomes something that can be used in the grade 5 or 6 class in the following year. And we did that 3 or 4 times, 2 years running, and it was really interesting. And the Aboriginal community planning, I could go on for days about how cool that was. But yeah.
And Heather, would you like to address that question?
Yeah, I agree. I think these we work in higher education, but certainly lots of my students that have gone through our graduate program, the Leadership for Sustainability Education program, they work with younger populations, many of them. So I find in talking with them, knowing about their work, that most of this is very transferable. And we also do work with middle school age kids at our Learning Gardens lab, doing garden-based education. So yeah, all ages.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We run a partnership that brings teacher candidates or student teachers together with practicing teachers to work in classrooms, bringing all different varieties of place-based education, nature-based learning, and sustainability education into classrooms. And often the same strategies that work in higher ed work just as well, whether that's in kindergarten or whether that's in grade 8 or grade 12. Putting students at the center of learning, I think, is really key to that, whether at any level, letting them know that they can follow their own questions and that they can use a whole variety of means to not only explore answers, but also to share what they've learned with others is really, really important to all of this, I think. We'll just take one more question. That's from Blake. Blake says, sustainability education to what end? Right? And a basic question, Blake. Blake says that propping up modernity and saving it from its own self-created demise, AKA the dominant project of risk management. To what end should we be doing sustainability education, both in higher ed settings and maybe in kindergarten to grade 12 education as well?
well, I don't think it's to prop up modernity. I think it's to find the ways that we are going to shift, that we are going to imagine what a future could look like that could be different. And that starts with dreaming it, right? Dreaming it, playing around with it, trying things, doing it. And the end is for something different, right? And in a way, it's also for being with the reality of what is as our climate deteriorates and our society deteriorates as well. Like students really need support in like, just how do we be during these times? So it's partly that. I think it's partly envisioning a different kind of future, but it's also sustainability for people care. Like, how do we care for each other during these times?
Rob, would you like to add your thoughts to this last
Yeah,
question?
I do think that there's there are people in my department who've argued that we need to start to prepare for the inevitability of the demise of the species, and I guess there's a certain hope that goes behind trying to create these kinds of programs. But I think there has to be a blend. I think that what Heather said is exactly what I need to do in my program. I need to be able to say to folks that we are on a particular path. We need to indulge in a conversation about that, and we need to have strategies to continue to work together. But it's a really difficult piece to add. All I can say is that a program means you can bring all kinds of great people in, and there are some great people that are doing the work at my university. I've asked them to come in, and there's a woman that just graduated from York who did an incredible dissertation on this topic, and if anybody's interested, they can contact me. And I was just blown away by how mature that approach has to be, and how far it is from from some of our thinking. But I think we need both.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's about sustaining the status quo, but I know that I feel a deep compulsion to ensure that as the human species goes down, if it does, and it's looking that way right now, but maybe we can pull it out if we change the way we teach in our courses, and train or help people to understand a different way. Train's not the best word, but help people to understand a different way of living in the world, that we can also ensure that other species besides the human species continues to survive and thrive on this planet as well. And I know that enacting hope is part of the work that I do as a university faculty member, and I'm hoping to model that through the transformative approaches I'm taking in my own courses. So with that, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much to our audience. We would just like to tell you before you leave a little bit. First of all, thank you, by the way, to our speakers. Heather, I am so starting my classes with the opening circle exercises that you introduced us today. And Rob, I'm going to be spending some time thinking more deeply about the competencies that I'm trying to develop in my courses as well. So thank you to you both for really fascinating ideas that you've shared around transformative approaches. I think we've just scratched the surface with today's webinar, and that we're going to need to return to think more deeply about this and to talk some more. And I'd just like to invite U of T faculty, staff, and doctoral students to an opportunity to do exactly this. On March 2nd, we'll be hosting what we call a forum, which is an opportunity to take the ideas and concepts introduced in today's session and to really unpack them some more, share our perspectives, to analyze some of the ideas that we've heard, and to work our way through thinking around transformative approaches. So I think one of my colleagues will be popping the link into the chat about how you can register for this. And this one is just open. Oh, thank you, Sarah. She's already done that. And this is just open to U of T faculty, staff, and doctoral students, just because we don't have the capacity to organize these events in ways that involve hundreds and hundreds of people. But you will be sent to the link to this webinar, and we'll make sure that the U of T folks have the link as well set out in case you can join us for that. There is a vegetarian luncheon that is provided as part of that for U of T community members. And then I'd also like to let you know that the Adams Sustainability Awards ceremony is coming up the day after on March 3rd, and that the CECCS really welcomes anyone to attend this particular event. It's taking place at Hart House from 1 till 5, and it's got all sorts of amazing components that are going to be happening. And we're thrilled that this is the first event that President Gertler is going to be speaking at on behalf of the CECCS as well. So that's really exciting. President Gertler has been very supportive of this work, and in fact has made sustainability one of the fourth pillar for what U of T is working on these days. So that's exciting as well, that we've got a little bit more institutional support, which is fantastic. So thank you everybody for attending today. Thank you again to Heather and to Rob, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with U of T community members on March 2nd. Thank you everybody. Miigwech.
Thank you.